Something or Other Publishing. Wade Franson is the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society, from messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted through our culture. Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Tonight's episode is Christmas Christian with Eric Mondschein.
Welcome everyone to the Created in the Image of God show. Tonight's program will be an absolute delight for me for many different reasons. And I'm sure that for everyone in the audience, it will be quite entertaining, educational, and interesting. I'd like to welcome Dr. Eric Mondschein into the studio. Welcome, Eric.
Good to see you.
There is a lot that we could be talking about. The standard format of our show is to introduce you in the intro portion by talking about your early years. And in this case, that's very useful in terms of the actual topic of the show, because not only are you an author who's written a vignette about Christmas, we'll get to your book a little bit later. The reason for that vignette, which, if I'm not mistaken, it was like the all-time most downloaded post, or at least during that season on Boomer Cafe, when it was posted and published there during the Christmas season. So it drew quite a lot of attention. But I think the content of it was so interesting and entertaining because of the backdrop of the fact that, if I've got the details right, your mother was Baha'i, your father was Jewish, and yet you celebrated Christmas, even though neither of those religions really celebrates Christmas as part of their tradition or part of their liturgy. So let's go back into the very origin story of Eric Mondschein by sharing a little bit about your parents and how they came to meet and decided to go on this journey together, even though the religious perspectives were somewhat different.
Okay, I actually know a little bit about it. They went on a blind date. My mother, who at the time was
how did that happen? What was the precursor to Tinder going way back then? Tinder being the big dating app, right? That enables those.
there were no dating apps back then, but they met in the 40s, the late 40s. It was after the war. My mom had been a Navy nurse and was, after the war, was still a nurse. My father was a practicing attorney, and they were introduced by friends, and they met. And yes, my dad was Jewish. My mother was a Baha'i, and they seemed to click, and they just got along, and they ended up getting married. And that was
for the audience who may not fully know and understand. Just give the very basic, 30-minute elevator speech about what does it mean to be a Jew and what does it mean to be a Baha'i, from your perspective.
Well, to be a Jew, you're born into a family that's been Jewish for thousands of years, and that was my dad. His family had come over from Germany in the late 1800s, and my mom, actually, her family came over with William Penn into Pennsylvania. Wow. And yes, and it was quite something. Anyway, her mother went out to a meeting. They were Catholic, and her mother went out to a meeting back in the day and came back and just told the family she's a Baha'i. And of course, her dad was like, a what? And so he went and said, well, I'm going to go to this meeting and see what that was about. And he came back several meetings later and told my mother that he was a Baha'i. And so now my mother and her younger brother were like, what's going on? And so they went to several of the meetings, and they ended up, becoming Baha'is. And a Baha'i
sounds to me, Eric, like they should have put on a mask or gotten vaccinated or something, because this was obviously very infectious.
Yeah, exactly. And it was actually pretty rough, because one of the major principles of the faith is the equality of not only men and women, but equality of the races. And this was in the 40s. And when the war broke out, my grandfather, my mother's father, was a butcher. And he served everyone from the community, whether they were Jewish or Black or Chinese or Japanese. And basically the family was ostracized by the white community at the time. And, that was that. In some ways, the other part of it is that they held meetings at their house where they invited the Baha'is of the community, and several were Black. So now this was Westchester County in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which back in the day was not the most inviting. Although the Underground Railroad
did. And this predated the civil rights movement and the eradication of laws and segregation.
Yeah, this was the 1940s.
Yep.
And 30s.
Right. So let me take a half step back and say, from my understanding, both the Jewish faith and the Baha'i faith are non-proselytizing religions, right? You mentioned, you're a Jew because your family goes back thousands of years. One doesn't think of Jews out trying to convert people to Judaism, but the Baha'is are also non-proselytizing. Am I not correct?
Baha'is don't proselytize. They're happy to share their faith, but they don't proselytize. That's not something that they do, nor are they allowed to do. But share the faith and want to share it as a gift, yes. But Jews, going back to the Old Testament, not that a Jew would call it the Old Testament.
Right.
You have to be. The Old and New Testaments are from those who came after.
The Torah, right?
Torah
or the writings, or the prophets, right?
The Pentateuch.
Right.
Anyway, back in the day, biblically, when they were taking over the Holy Land, they provided the people with a choice to join them or be removed. And so that may have been the one place you had conversions to Judaism, was biblically speaking. But no, it's not something that people go out of the way, although a number of people have converted to Judaism, even today. So yeah, you can.
It's not forbidden. It's not forbidden in the Jewish faith, is it, to proselytize, or is it? And they wouldn't call it proselytizing, probably, but that probably comes from a Greek word.
Proselytize doesn't mean teach,
but
and so Jews do not proselytize. But if you want to become a Jew, they're more than happy to welcome you. There's a distinction there, but they don't go out of their way to try and get you to convert. But if you do, they welcome you. And so you had my mother, who came from that very white. I was going to say she came from the Pennsylvania, was white. It was a mix of Quaker and Protestant and Catholic. And my father grew up in Brooklyn. He was a Brooklyn, New York Jew. And his father was called a butter and egg man. And so that's what he did. Although the Depression, he died before the Depression. It actually is something that gave him a heart attack. So it was a rough life for them. And my father was the first member of his family to go to college. And my mother was the first in her family, not only to become the nurse, but she went on to get a master's degree. So she was the first in her family to do that as well. But anyway, they got together. And what's interesting is, in order for Baha'is to get married, they have to get permission from the parents. And my grandmother, my dad's mom, could have said no, and that would have been the end of it. But she went ahead and said yes, which I'm thankful for, because that's how I got here.
All right. So then you were born into this household. So
yes,
you grew up. So tell me a little bit about those early years and how religion was presented or represented in your household, with two parents believing different things.
Okay. Well, some of the major principles of the faith, my father had no problem with. He he had no problem with recognizing the equality of men and women and the equality of the races. That was something.
So mostly they believed the same things, which is
In
why the
general.
marriage was successful.
In
There might have
general.
been some general, some doctrinal issues that were viewed as minor, perhaps, by your parents, or how did that work out?
Well, to them it was minor, but it was, in some ways, it was big, because in order to become a Baha'i, you not only have to recognize that there is one God, but that all the prophets are manifestations, from Zoroaster and Krishna to Moses and Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad were prophets of God, the same God.
And by the way, it's my belief, and the belief of many, that Zoroaster played a role in the birth of Jesus, with the wise men coming from the east.
Yeah, we're three Zoroastrian kings. Yes, they were Zoroastrians who recognized that prophecy. And as a Baha'i, I have to also accept Jesus as the Son of God. So my mother did. And my father was, okay, he's a good Jewish boy, but, and he meant well, and his teachings were sound, but that was that's how he reviewed it. Anyway, growing up, we did.
But your father, but from what I understand, your father was the one who kind of pushed Christmas.
Well, yes, which is interesting, because, when we were really little, before we recognized that there would even be a Christmas, I don't know what they did. Although every summer we would go to a Baha'i summer school. Okay. But when I got to be old enough, I also went to Hebrew school, because they felt it was important for me to know what Judaism, which was part of my growing up, my dad, as well as learning about the Baha'i faith, which was Mom. And so I spent 3 years, 2 days a week going to Hebrew school, because it was the intention to be bar mitzvah. But going back to, I guess, maybe the first Christmas I remember, I was 4 or 5, and waking up and going downstairs, and in the middle of the living room was this gigantic Christmas tree with all these lights, a train running around it. And there were footsteps from the fireplace across the carpet to the coffee table, where there was an empty plate of cookie crumbs.
Soot-covered footsteps, no doubt.
Yes, that's what they were, right from the fireplace.
Yeah.
And I could still remember my mom looking at my dad saying something about, and who's cleaning up this mess? I do remember that. But that was something that began, and as I got older, I began to appreciate that my father just believed that every child should celebrate Christmas, should have a Christmas. Now, what that means to everyone is going to be different. But to him, it meant seeing the faces of my brother and myself coming downstairs and seeing this tree lit up with the icicles hanging, and the lights and the candy canes, and this star that was lit up at the top, but the trains running around, and then packages and Christmas presents everywhere. Later, I learned that it was his best friend, Benny Rabinowitz, another Jew, who would help him set up the tree and decorate it. And that was something that we just had growing up. And my mom would put a candy cane on the door, one of those big styrofoam candy canes with the green, and that was on our front door. And I just remembered it being a very special time. So yeah, so that's what we celebrate. And we did as we got older have Hanukkah, and we celebrated Hanukkah and what that meant, and then into Christmas. But so yeah, in that way I got the benefit of both worlds. It's a lot of presents when you deal with a present every night, lighting the candle, and then you get Christmas.
So allow me to share a little bit of my own background and why this particular topic is so fascinating to me. As many as you know, and many of my viewers here, although every time we have a new guest, new people show up that may not know me or the story. My father joined a religious group, sect, you might say, when I was about 10. And this particular religious group or sect believed that Christmas had pagan origins. And some will know the stories or the research in which, if you go into the Bible and you use the Bible as evidence, one can come to the conclusion that Jesus was not born anywhere near December 25th, because the census which brought Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem would most likely never have been conducted in the coldest winter, where there would have possibly been snow. Secondly, there's evidence that the sheep herders, that the sheep were still in the fields at that time. Even though, yes, there's stories of them being in the manger, but I won't go into all his detail. And again, that would indicate that he might have been born in the fall, might have been sometime around Rosh Hashanah, for example, or Yom Kippur, or Sukkoth in Jewish terms. maybe one of those festivals, would have been more his time of birth. Regardless of whether this is true or not, there's also, the Saturnalia, there's the solstice, there's evidence from other quarters that, the early Christians were seeking to align the birth of their Savior with existing holidays to help further the spread of the new religion. Whether all these things are true, our viewers can research it themselves. I'm not getting into whether or not this is true or not. I'm simply saying that these were the tenets of the religion in which I was raised from the age of 11. So we did not celebrate Christmas at all. We believed it was a corruption of Jesus' birthday. The reason I share this now is because today I kind of honestly don't care about that piece of it at all. However, my Catholic in-laws, my wife having been raised Catholic, they celebrate Christmas. And so late in life, I was suddenly confronted with having to, or having the blessing of, depending on which way one looks at it, celebrating Christmas, when I had most of my life never done so. And I have my own children, and so they get to experience Christmas in a similar way to you, in that sense, at their in-laws. Now, the whole point of this piece of the story is that we were just there celebrating Christmas. And it occurred to me for the first time, even though I've done this since my children were born, and my daughter's now 15, we've gone there every year. And we do the traditions, right? And so one of the things is they always watch A Christmas Story. And for those who know this story, it's the one with little Ralphie who wants a BB gun for Christmas, and his mother doesn't want him to have it because he would shoot his eye out. And it occurred to me this year for the first time throughout that entire movie that Jesus is never mentioned. There's no really information about that part of Christmas at all. The story simply circulates around the tree, the gifts, and all the other, you might say, trappings of Christmas. They serve turkey at that dinner, and at the end of the show, the dogs come and get the turkey. There is one scene where and of course, there's the famous, prize that he wins of a woman's leg lampshade, and the bullies that beat up the kids, and the tongue getting stuck to the pole. There are all these wonderful stories woven into the story about the BB gun. And there is one scene where the husband, the father, is up on a ladder trying to straighten the star up at the top of the tree. So you might say, well, that star, invokes Christmas and brings Christmas to light. That star representing the star that the wise men sought. But it just struck me, here is this Catholic family, and then we go to other in-laws, and they do a white elephant. And throughout the entire season, nothing is ever mentioned about the religious elements of this. And it struck me also then that in the history and the tradition of America, a nation where we have freedom of religion, and we have a melting pot of different religions, different people of different backgrounds, and even within Christianity, different traditions, all being able to come together and find common ground and have this celebration throughout our history. That in your instance, your parents of two different faiths also found that common ground, and your Jewish father really wanted in on that American celebration of Christmas.
Yeah, and I think, and you're mentioning that one of the classic Christmas stories was made in 1948, and it was Miracle on 34th Street. where Santa Claus goes on trial to prove that he's actually Santa Claus. But nowhere in that entire Christmas story is there any mention of Jesus, let alone that it's a religious holiday. It's really a story about Santa and Macy's and Gimbals and selling toys. But you're right. I mean, just even in that classic, which was a great, I liked, Darren McGavin was in that. It was a great movie, that the Christmas Story. But yeah, now with my dad, one of the things that I think he said, and I think this is quite telling, was he didn't have a problem celebrating Christmas because he said, what's this got to do with Christianity? I mean, that is something that he said. He said, we're celebrating a fat man with a beard and a red outfit, and there's a Christmas tree and gifts. It's a wonderful time of year. We're all giving gifts to each other, and people seem to be happy. But so what's this got to do with religion? And that was coming from a Jew. And I think in some ways he was making a good point, because I think in ways we've lost that.
Well, but in the case of your family, and this is kind of the point that I'm at least making at this stage in the show, that was a blessing.
Yes,
your parents,
absolutely.
Right. So my point being that in America, given the circumstances of the birth of our nation and the desire to create a more fair and equitable union, and one which it was different and novel from errors of the past, freedom of religion was a point. And so the Americanized version of Christmas focused on material things with spiritual virtues woven in, right? Gift giving and many other sentiments that are positive. And yet the specifically
Well, I think we lost you. You're breaking up.
religious, or what I say, doctrinal aspects of it were removed from that.
Wade, you're frozen. Are you back? Can you hear me, Wade?
I am back. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. My question, if you did, I did not hear your.
No, I did. No one heard your question. You broke up.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, so the question was, well, I was sort of setting it up again with the fact that the way that our nation was established, this particularly Americanized version of Christmas got established, in which the specifically religious, dare I say, doctrinal elements were removed, allowing free participation and sharing in the tradition without it having to be so explicitly religious.
Yeah, I don't know if that was on purpose, but I think it's what happened. But that was also true in Western Europe as well, and the concept of Santa Claus and Saint Nick. So that was something that did come from Europe. But in the United States, I think there was a sense of making it well, because even in Christianity, the different sects looked at it differently, and they were trying to make it more palatable, if you will, to everyone, so that we could all enjoy it. I just know that when I was growing up, and again, that dates me. I mean, we're talking about 1950s and 60s, and for me, Christmas was a very special time. We loved it. My brother and I absolutely adored it. My mother went out of her way making decorations, and my father loved it. And that was something that we enjoyed. And like you now, once I grew up and married, and I happened to marry a Baha'i, but she comes from a Christian family. And so we would celebrate Christmas with her parents and her family. And it was a large family with her mom had 7 brothers. And so you could imagine we had a Christmas morning breakfast with some 50 people. That it was
Wow.
very exciting. But we also, our children got to decorate the tree, and they got to wake up and there were the Christmas presents, and we all shared presents. And there's no reason why people can't participate and share in something that makes people happy. So, we enjoyed it. So,
well, we'll dive into that aspect of this a little bit later. Right now, we're going to go to a commercial break. I've had the little ticker tape running now and then to remind our audience to participate in the chat. We're seeing the beginnings of that. Hopefully, the audience is enjoying the conversation, but don't forget, Mr. Mondschein is an author. He has a book, as I mentioned, that delivered stories that were very popular on the internet on certain sites, as well as it won recently I believe it was the National Association of Book Entrepreneurs Award,
yes.
the NABE, and you're celebrating a 10th anniversary relaunch of that. So we're going to go ahead and give away a copy of your book to the person who at the end of the show has commented in the way that you found the most enlightening, amusing, helpful, or whatever. And to whet people's appetite, we're going to play a little trailer of your book. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. When this little trailer of Mr. Mondschein's book ends, we'll be right back diving into the topic of is Christmas Christian? Be right back. Welcome back. That was Dr. Mondschein's book, Life at 12 College Road, which tells very humorous at times, heartrending at times, entertaining at other times, stories of his childhood, including a famous Christmas in your household, I believe. Tell us a little bit about the Christmas vignette in that book.
Well, we always, Christmas morning, would go downstairs, we'd get our parents up and race downstairs to see the fireplace with the stockings that were hung and the presents all around in front of the fireplace and the cookies that were gone and the Christmas tree and the trains that were running around them. And that was one morning my brother and I got up, and we didn't wake my parents up. We went downstairs and we saw the living room filled with presents and the tree lit up and the train going. And my brother and I proceeded to sit there and open all our presents. And
you broke with tradition.
yeah, we broke with tradition. And my father was the first one to come
Thou
down.
shalt not.
Yeah, my father was the first one to come down, and he saw what we did. He didn't say a word. He turned around and walked back upstairs. My mother came down, and she looked at both of us, and it was, all she said was, "Oh, Mort," which was my dad's name, Morton. And she went upstairs, and she didn't come down for the day. And we realized what we had done. And we took all the joy of Christmas, which for them, now I'm an adult and a parent, was watching the faces on your children when they opened up gifts and saw what they got. And all they saw was a living room with papers everywhere and all the toys. And it was not good. Christmas after that was not the same. We went through Christmas, but it was never really the same since we did that.
So this was worse than realizing that there really was not a Santa Claus.
Oh, this was really bad. Yeah, this was bad.
So,
yeah,
and how old were you at that Christmas? About
maybe 8, 9, old enough to know better, but young enough not to think.
Your younger brother, did he have a get out of jail free card? Was he just following older?
My younger brother always had a get out of jail free card. He just learned what not to do by watching his older brother.
Well, it's interesting because that is about the time where, so in my childhood, when I was 8, I was brought to live with my aunt and uncle in Sweden. And the Swedes family knew how to celebrate, kind of epic. There's also traditions there where it was literally dancing around the tree. There was the singing of traditional Christmas folk songs, which are quite amusing and entertaining in the Swedish language. There's a lot of fun alliteration. One particular one is Räven raskar över isen. And there's this lyrical element to it. Basically, that's just a fox runs across the ice. But when you sing it in Swedish, it's just so much more fun. But then I came to the self-awareness of that greed that kind of drove you to go there and rip those presents open. You know what I mean? That eagerness to get all these presents, right? That probably there was a little bit of revulsion on your parents' part. Like, what have we raised, right? What have we? How is it that we raised our children to be so greedy and disrespectful of the whole point, right?
And insensitive.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another famous scene from the Christmas Story movie where the kids are opening the presents and there's socks, and Ralphie and his brother, forget his brother's name at the Linus. I don't think it's Linus, but might come to me later. Anyway, Ralphie and his little brother, they both look at the socks and they go close and they throw them behind their back and go to open another present, right? And most kids have had that experience of a present that they don't want. It's practical, and where's the thing I really wanted, and I didn't, and all this stuff, and I didn't get what I wanted, right? And there came a point where fairly early in my childhood, I was repulsed by all that, even just sort of being able to see myself in the mirror, my own emotions, and I didn't like it. And I didn't like the feelings associated with it. So I was in complete alignment on that basis with our rejection of Christmas, because what does all of that have to do with Jesus anyway? Mm-hmm. Aside from the things about the whether or not that really was his birthday. And furthermore, in the Bible, there's no real evidence that he ever said we should celebrate his birth, but rather he tells people to celebrate his death. And he tells them how to commemorate his death, which was around Passover or at Easter time in the Christian tradition. I'm going to go to one audience comment right now because there's some interesting comments in the audience. Here's somebody that says, Fuad shares that there was no census in Roman time. That is a myth. he says. I've asked him to provide a source for that assertion, because it's my understanding that there were indeed, census at that time, and others in the audience have also brought up the issue of a census, right, and other evidence as to when and where Christ was born. But since since there's no specific instructions in the Bible, to my awareness, nowhere does it tell us to celebrate his birth. Nowhere does it give us, therefore, any traditions around how to celebrate his birth. In that sense, it's perhaps just a natural outgrowth of the desire to celebrate and worship Jesus, to commemorate his birth and to provide your own traditions around how to do it, given that there are literally no specific instructions to do it. And then one takes the Christmas stories in the Bible around the three wise men who brought gifts for Jesus, the king. Now, those gifts were very specific, right? There was the spikenard and the gold, to anoint the king and honor the king, to bear homage to a king, right? And that's different from the gifts we give to each other. But again, in fairness, well, without specific instructions around that birth to maybe how to perform those rituals, we have come up with our own. What are your thoughts on that as a Baha'i, which is a religion and a faith that embraces all the religions as coming from the same source?
Yeah, I really don't know how to answer that question, because most of the things that I find I'm concerned with are the major principles of the faith. What do they teach? I mean, with the golden rule, with the equality of men and women, with a Baha'i, with all races are equal, and we're all one people, if you will. Getting into the, I don't know, I don't want to use the word minutia because that's too specific. But I find most of the things that create division with people are things that, when you really look at it, what did it matter? What does it matter?
Right.
I mean, the issues of, you want to get into issues, yeah, the equality of men and women, that's an issue worth discussing. Well, and we can discuss that. If one group doesn't believe that men and women are equal, or that the races are not equal as far as abilities, or allowing them to to have opportunities that everyone has, I'm happy to discuss that. But I don't know. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I mean,
absolutely, and I agree with you.
Let's have a fight as to, well, when was Christ born? Well, we know he was born. We know that he was born. Was it the 24th of December, the 25th of December? Was it April 15th? What was it, in October or September? I don't know. I find it interesting that Eastern Orthodox Christians don't believe it's the 25th, and they have their own different dates. What do we know historically that's been kept? Do we know that there was a little lamb in the manger? Well, most sheep gave birth in the spring, not in the middle of the winter. So was that, I mean, what is it that we're looking at? And, whether or not, I will mention with the census, with some of my studies in ancient history, the Romans established the census. They had one every 5 years. Now, whether they did it in Judah, I don't know. But I know that the Romans actually gave us the census. So I don't know whether there was one or there wasn't. Up until recently, most historians thought there was. So now we have some that argue that there wasn't. But well, see, those are the things that, those are things like, what difference does it make?
Right.
That's to me. I mean, to me, Jesus, as a Baha'i, Jesus was born. He's the Son of God. He's a manifestation. He brought something to the world that at the time and now was something that was beautiful. I mean, what's the golden rule?
I might share here also that Baha'is do believe that Jesus was the result of a virgin birth,
Yes,
right?
we do.
But again, and I agree with you on this, and let me give an example of why I agree on this. This is not helpful to assert to other people and insist upon with other people.
No.
It's a private belief in my past fellowship, and I hope that there are some here in the audience tonight who are from that religious tradition that I grew up with and I was a minister in, because we had very strong beliefs, and these beliefs were incredibly important to us. And one of them was the belief in a seventh-day Sabbath and the observance of the Jewish Sabbath, right? Because we did not see evidence in the New Testament of Jesus having abrogated that. We did not see that evidence. That there is evidence there that can be argued that he did. I won't get into the rightness or wrongness. I'm speaking of the beliefs that we had. But this was very, very important to us. But as I began to teach, even in my own ministry within that fellowship, this was a private thing for us. It was not the outward sign, because Jesus said, "By this shall all men know that you are my disciples." So what we believed privately was not for public proclamation, but by this shall all men know that you are my disciples. So if there was something that was for public proclamation, and I use the word here by choice, proclamation, what we were supposed to proclaim was this: that you love one another. Now that's a joke, because anyone who goes around proclaiming how much he loves everybody, Paul elsewhere said he is a sounding brass and a clanging cymbal. You don't go around telling people how much you love all humanity. You have to prove it. Be the light of the world, not the loudspeaker of the world. And so if an outside independent third-party observer is watching and sees that these people are full of love to each other, that is what Jesus says is the sign that should be visible to the world. So the private beliefs, the private doctrines, to your point, they may be deeply held beliefs. They may be important within the faith to understand and to teach, but outwardly, these are the things that cause divisions. And if we're arguing about them, we might as well not be claiming to be religious at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same in the faith, the Baha'i faith. It's your actions, your deeds, not words. But that's also with Judaism. I mean,
it's with every religion,
yes.
but the practitioners don't necessarily follow it, because we all like to virtue signal about how good we are and how perfect we are, and even about how our own religion is better than other religions, which is not what we should be believing. And this is another, you talked about the equality of men and women, you talked about the equality of the races, but let's talk for a moment about the equality of religions. What does the Baha'i faith teach about these different religions?
Well, just using brushstrokes and being general, we believe there's one God, and we believe in progressive revelation, which is God has never left us alone. He has always provided a spiritual teacher, if you will. And whether it was Krishna, Buddha, Zoroaster, Moses, Jesus, they are prophets, or in the faith we say manifestations of God, who brought the teachings of the one true God to the people. And it was provided to the people at a particular time that they needed, which is a great example. I mean, most Christians understand it with the Jews. The Jews had lost their way. They had lost what God had taught them. I mean, frankly. And that's why, and Jesus came, but for everyone, not just the Jews. But after that, time goes by, and we're even promised that there would be others. Even Jesus said, and if you go back into the Old Testament, the lesser prophets, if you will, the Isaiahs, they talked about people coming in the future for us, that we would never be left alone, that God gives us direction and teaches us. And we as a civilization, as society, as a people, are maturing from the Stone Age to where we are today, although some would argue that it looks like we're going backwards at the moment. It would be hard for me to argue with them. But I think that's what the Baha'i faith teaches. I mean, in order for me to be a Baha'i, I have to recognize the manifestations of God. I have to believe that Krishna and Buddha and Moses and Jesus were of God, the same God, the same as with Muhammad. And we believe today that Baha'u'llah has come. So that's what a Baha'i believes. So, and are the religions better than one? Is one better than the other? No, because all the teachings are from one God, but they came at different times. It doesn't mean that what they said now is wrong. In some ways, it means that now we're at a stage where this is what he's telling us to do. And it doesn't necessarily negate what he said before, but now is, we're looking at these things now. So.
Thank you. One of the things that I always found fascinating was how in the 10 Commandments that Moses brought down from the mountain on the tablets of stone, you have, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. And then Jesus, who only gave, he said, I bring you a new commandment, and he condensed the commandments into two: love God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And yet he also taught, why do you call me Lord and don't do the things that I say? Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring that up is I always equated that with that commandment, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. And you should not claim to be a Christian if you're not going to observe what Jesus actually said to do. And I know it's the same in the Baha'i faith. The Kitabi Akdas, the most holy book, says you must recognize the manifestation that God's sent. And then immediately it says, and you must follow his command, or some equivalent thereof, right? Those are the
I think
two.
Yeah, but I think one of the reasons why, I'll say it for myself, I believe that Jesus, as I was taught, was the Son of God. He's not God. He wouldn't have said he was the Son of God, nor would he have prayed to his Father. Now, he brought the Father's teachings to us, but he himself says that he's not the Lord, in the sense of using Lord as God. That's what I'm trying. Because I believe he's the Son of God. I do. No,
he said that he came to reveal the Father.
That's right. Well, revealing the Father doesn't mean that he is God. His teachings he brought. But that's I'm just saying, and I'm not going to, that's just.
Well,
my perspective with 3 years of Hebrew school and being a Baha'i. So I don't pretend or profess to be a Christian scholar.
Well, one of the things that I learned when I was a minister in the Worldwide Church of God, and the schism that split that organization right down the middle, which led to my resigning from the ministry. At the time, I was very successful and, dare I say, popular, in that I was in Europe and I was traveling around the entire continent and in the Soviet Union. I spoke several languages, was giving sermons in multiple countries in Europe, came back to the US, and both sides of this schism were inviting me to join them. And here we were splitting right down the middle, and I didn't want to choose sides. There was more to it than that, but that's the simplified version. And the schism, one of the things that caused this schism was a debate about the nature of God and a debate about the Trinity. So this is a topic that I generally avoid because, to your point about divisions. But one of the comments in the chat, really interesting, from Chill Out. Sorry for mangling your name, Tayisi Sonia. I'm not going to post it because it's very long, but I'm going to read a part of it. Hopefully our viewers can see this in the chat. At least there are different channels. This one's coming in from Facebook. This is what she's quoting from the Baha'i faith. She says, "We testify that when he, Jesus, came into the world, he shed the splendor of his glory upon all created things. Through him the leper recovered, and the leprosy of perversity and ignorance. Through him the unchaste and wayward were healed. Through his power, born of Almighty God, the eyes of the blind were opened, and the soul of the sinner sanctified. We bear witness that through the power of the word of God, every leper was cleansed, every sickness was healed, every human infirmity was banished. He it is who purified the world." So I just want to highlight that that profound respect and love that is expressed for Jesus in the Baha'i faith.
Yes.
And just to share that for everybody. So I would now like to just say we're going to go quickly to another commercial break. One of our sponsors has an app that you can use to download to have the holy books of the world read to you. This app is called Ocean 2.0. It's quite powerful. Give it a quick listen, and just you can go to your phone and download this app for free in support of our sponsor. When we return, we will dive into more with Dr. Mondschein. We'll look at some of the comments. We'll announce a second giveaway in addition to his book, and much more to come. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Discover the world's religious traditions like never before with Ocean 2.0 Reader. Our custom ebook reader is designed for exploration and study with an immersive audio integrated reading experience and powerful research tools available on all platforms including web, Windows, macOS, Linux, Android, and iOS. Experience the benefits of immersive reading by combining ear and eye with improved comprehension and vocabulary acquisition. Our interfaith library features books from various religions, so you can have access to a wealth of knowledge. Try Ocean 2.0 Reader today and elevate your reading experience.
Like I said, it's free on an app, and here's a little QR code. You can hold your phone up to the screen and use that QR code to access Ocean 2.0 and download it right now for your listening and reading enjoyment. And compare what these holy books say, and do your own research, do your own independent investigation on some of these topics. So we're going to now look at a couple of the comments in the chat. There is, of course, the question of whether or not there was a census. Again, an issue that you can do your own research on. Mm-hmm. Number of questions about Christmas trees. What does a Christmas tree have to do with a desert place like Israel? Well, yeah, there were no Christmas trees there, but many other places on Earth do.
I can tell you that there are what are pine trees in Israel. I lived in Israel for 11 years.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your experience living in Israel and the Israeli people and your experience there.
Well, I spent 11 years in Haifa, Israel. I served at the Baha'i World Center, which is the spiritual and administrative center of the Baha'i faith, which is in Haifa on Mount Carmel. I worked in the area of external affairs and security, but we got to visit everywhere in Israel while I was there, and it's an incredible country. I recommend. When it's peaceful, I recommend people visiting Israel, especially people from a Jewish or Christian background, as well as a Muslim background, because that's the center of those three religions where they are from. Although the Baha'i faith is the only religion that's now there, which its administrative and spiritual headquarters is actually in Israel. The Jews come close with Jerusalem, and it being their history is there. But the people, they always refer to themselves as someone who's born in Israel is called a sabra. And it's actually a form of a cactus plant, which is incredibly bristly and prickly on the outside, but very sweet and soft in the inside. And we found them to be that way. I mean, once you got to know them, they were incredibly friendly. There were issues that if you fell down or tripped on the sidewalk, no one walks by you. They all stop to see how you're doing. If there is a car accident, it's not a matter of will someone stop. They all stop and they help you. I mean, that's something that we found. But the country is beautiful. The people were nice. The food is phenomenal. I will tell you that. I love the food. And I love being there. And to go to the sites that you realize are 2,000 and 3,000 and 4,000 years old. It's an amazing place to visit with the archaeological sites and the digs, and almost everywhere you go, it's not just historical. It's biblical. So we loved our time there.
Yeah, my first trip there was in 1981, and I was on the City of David archaeological expedition. Took my family there for a Baha'i pilgrimage in January. And we visited that site in Jerusalem. It was just amazing, just unbelievable what they've done in terms of turning it into a modern archaeological park with very modern elements, including videos and 3D rendering. And anyway, then we were in Haifa, and my daughter, one of her goals was to continue to work out because she's a gymnast. And she was 14 at the time, and she wanted to find a gym. And down below where we stayed in our Airbnb, there was this little shop that had a lot of protein powders and stuff. So we went in, and lo and behold, the owner of the shop was an Arab, and he was bulked up to the max. He was a bodybuilder himself. And when we let him know what we were there for, he immediately embraced my daughter, not literally, but figuratively, and our whole family, and said, "Don't you worry, I will take care of it." And he went out of his way to get her hooked up with a gym and arranged for a trial membership through his relationship. And there was another Arab family with a car garage that we had to use some of the time. And of course, many Israeli neighbors as well. But I just want to say my personal experience there of the ability of Israel also to, in that sense, to a degree, emulate the United States in its assimilation of different cultures and different peoples.
Well, the apartment building that my wife and I lived in, our next door neighbors were Muslim Arabs, and they were Muslim Christians. They were Jews, but it was completely diverse apartment building. And I think sometimes people don't realize Haifa it's 60% Jewish, and it was 60% Arab, Christian, and Muslim. That was the makeup of Haifa. So.
Yep. I'd like to go back now quickly to a couple of comments from Lord Call. And I'll show one here. He's referring to the comment I made about Jesus admonishing us to celebrate his death and giving us specific instructions. And he says that the Passover makes the time of the crucifixion more certain, whereas the time of his birth has no similar anchor. Exactly. We do know approximately when Jesus died. This is a fascinating area of study. You may wish to look into it as to when was Jesus' crucifixion actually, and when was the day of his resurrection, as it's called, because of the issue of the Sabbath day being not only a seventh day, i.e. the Saturday, but there were also annual Sabbaths, right? And around that time of Passover, you have the first and the last day of unleavened bread, which are annual Sabbaths, which fall on weekdays. And there are different theories about Jesus' crucifixion around the 3 days and 3 nights. I'm just not going to get into that. It's an area for study. You may find it fascinating. So even at Passover, there's some different difference of opinions on when exactly was his death. However, it's very clear from the pages of the Bible that he gave specific instructions how to commemorate it with the symbols. And there's this other ritual that Jesus instituted that very few people know about that I would just like to share with the audience, and that is the foot washing. The foot washing is when Jesus knelt down at the Passover service and washed the feet of his disciples. And he told them to do the same thing to one another. Now, this is obviously something that can be practiced spiritually in an attitude of humility. But there are also some churches who actually practice that physical ritual of washing each other's feet. Might seem not the most sanitary in some ways, but this is the devotion that various people bring to their rituals and to their beliefs in humility and submission to what they believe, whether it be Moses or Jesus or Muhammad or Baha'u'llah have said. I also want to share one more thing, and I don't know if you have any comments about this, Eric, but Jesus said, in terms of, you had earlier mentioned that he said he would come again, and others would as well. He said very specifically, when asked about the question of Elijah, he said Elijah has come in the form of John the Baptist, but he said Elijah must first come again. With regards to his return, right? So Jesus predicted not only his own return, but the return of Elijah. So yes, Jesus did in fact make statements that lead us to conclude that in that sense, he was not the end of everything, and that there would be future arrivals of himself and messengers from God that would fulfill purposes in the divine prophetic framework.
Yeah, I mean, as a Baha'i, we believe that as well. And for us, the person known as the Bab or Gate was the forerunner of Baha'u'llah, who came to foretell that Baha'u'llah was coming. And he had come in 1844 and proclaimed that Baha'u'llah would soon be coming. And Baha'is believed that he was, in a sense, who Jesus was referring to as the new Elijah, and that Baha'u'llah is now come. So,
and the Bab specifically had a formulation as he was predicting the arrival. What was that formulation?
Right now, I'm trying to find.
I'm sorry, I thought it was a softball, but of course you are in Eastern time zone.
Yeah.
And it's even an hour later there. But is it not he whom God will make manifest?
Yes. Yes.
I love that because it evokes Harry Potter, he who shall not be mentioned. But anyway, I don't mean to make light of it, but he whom God will make manifest. He immediately directed his followers less to himself and more to he whom God will make manifest. He, of course, wanted his followers to obey his laws and his teachings, but he pointed them to the future. And isn't it interesting? This is something, it's throughout the pages of the Bible. We're always being pointed to the future. Is this something that also is inherent in the Baha'i teachings? In the
Baha'i thinking, we've been told that in 1,000 years after Baha'u'llah came, there would be another manifestation, because humanity will have evolved where it's going to now need new laws or more things explained that we may not understand now.
And based on historical evidence, obviously we want to be positive and put things in a positive term, and it's not that things devolve, but things do tend to stray off course, do they not?
Well, history has shown us that we as human beings tend to lose sight of the prize. I think that's a fair statement.
I'm always
yeah. It's just, this is what we always seem to learn the hard way as a species. and we seem to always get ourselves in trouble, and we need to have the course corrections, which are sometimes incredibly unpleasant. And that's usually when a new manifestation comes. I mean, when you look at when the time of Jesus coming, the Jews had thoroughly lost their way. And that was one of the reasons, he came, and so, yeah.
Yeah, the moon landing is instructive in that regard, because it's my understanding, and I'm not an expert, but there were constant course corrections in the Apollo missions to make sure that the people in that capsule would actually land on the moon.
Yeah.
And that if those constant course corrections had not been made, they would have missed the moon, not by, a few miles, but by thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of miles, and sailed off into outer darkness and their doom.
Well, for me, what makes it, in a sense, this is how I am able to handle some of this stuff in my own mind, was that when you think of humanity as a species that's been evolving from its infancy to its childhood, what we try and teach our babies is not the same as what you teach a teenager. And when you consider humanity as evolving and now reaching, in a sense, we have the ability, when you think about the world now, literally, it's one. When we have pictures from space showing that we live on this spherical globe, that's it. It's us. We're it on this planet. And it's like, well, why can't we live together? And when you go back and look at all the teachings from all the manifestations, they've been trying to prepare us for this. But if a manifestation came and talked about the world the way we now see it, people 4,000 years ago wouldn't have been able to understand. They were still dealing with the fact the world was flat. And some people still think it's flat, so go figure that one. But this is where we're trying to now see that as we've matured, as we've grown, our spiritual capabilities are reaching that point where we can handle some of this stuff or kill ourselves. I mean, that's the choice we're going to have. We have now learned or have the ability to create incredible new things or literally destroy ourselves. That's our choice. That wasn't possible 2,000 years ago. You could have destroyed where you lived, but the world wouldn't have been affected. Now we can affect ourselves. Think about it now. You're on whatever this Zoom is or whatever link you have, and I'm looking over here and I saw someone from Mongolia write in. It's instantaneous globally, which would try and explain that to someone 3,000 years ago. I mean, this is where we are today. And I think that as we mature, the teachings that God provides us through his manifestations or prophets, if you will, is something that we're now capable of dealing with. And we have to rise to the occasion. And I've been watching, when you think about the world, you've gone from what? A tribe, a clan, to a city-state, to we have nations. Now we're trying to live together globally, which we seem to be screwing it up right now. But people can see the potential. There's no reason why we can't do it. We have to have the will to do it. But I think what you see when you go back and look at how God has tried to give us the guidance to get us to where we are now and how we can put this all together, I don't think he's going to leave us alone. So that's why when, as Baha'is, we're told that every 1,000 years there'll be a new teacher, if you will, that God will provide, because we're going to need the guidance. And not only to keep us on the straight and narrow, if you will, but also to deal with the new environment that we're going to be living in, that we created for ourselves or that we're seeing. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated in recent decades about how the warnings of the Book of Revelation are today trumpeted more loudly by science than by religion, right? The earth getting 7 times hotter, and we have climate change, the spread of diseases, and we have the declaration of global pandemics, and many such examples that I could draw. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. But rather than get into any of that, I know that we're a little bit over time. I do appreciate it's later where you are. And I also appreciate that some in our audience may have other things to go to, like Lord Call, if you're still there. Don't go to dinner just yet, because we're going to pick one of you to win this book, or check back in later to see if you've won. We're going to go to one last commercial break, where we're going to announce yet another book. We're going to give away 2 of these. This is an anthology, and I hope that you'll find this interesting. We also have, from the same sponsor, the option, if any of you want to contribute to these anthologies, reach out to us as well. But stay tuned for this short announcement about another book, and we'll be announcing the winners of Dr. Mondschein's book and this book right after this. Stay tuned.
America's greatest literary treasures, Mark Twain, once said, "I apologize for such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." Get ready for a literary journey that's as rich and diverse as the flavors in a fine wine. Introducing 25 Servings of Soup, a literary tasting of established and rising talent. These stories aren't just enjoyable on the surface. Each one carries a special note, a subtle exploration of social issues, a celebration of diverse characters, and a spotlight on the challenges faced by those different from us. As you turn the pages, you'll find not just entertainment, but a profound invitation. An invitation to understand, respect, love, and empathize with others better. Dive into 25 Servings of Soup, literary journeys into life, meaning, and love. Because great stories are meant to be savored, shared, and remembered. Grab your copy today.
And in case you just need to, get this book and get out of here and can't wait to be announced the winner of it, there's the QR code for you to order it directly off of Amazon. And I might add, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Mondschein contributed a short story to this volume as well.
Yes,
and,
I did.
So you really need both books, right? To complete the whole picture.
Yes, and this one would be Dinner at Grandma's, and that's my father's mother. So it gives you the dinner in the Jewish family, as opposed to just the one with Christmas.
Well, we need equal representation, right? We got to give,
There you go.
So yeah. Anyway, I'll hide that QR code now, and we'll go to a couple of these comments from the chat. So here's another interesting one. Yes, the foot washing ritual is only in the Gospel of John. Gospel of John is by many viewed as the disciple of love. He wrote a lot about love, and Jesus, he also records that he was the disciple whom Jesus loved, and perhaps Jesus loved all his disciples. But John obviously felt a very special connection with Jesus, and wrote extensively about aspects that are different from the synoptic gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the foot washing is one of them. So thank you for pointing that out. Because you had to go to dinner, I get to be the chooser of the comment for the 25 servings of soup. And I'm going to go ahead and grant that one to you. So please, is that an A or an O? KHAL. Please write to info@soupllc.com to claim 25 servings of soup, volume 1. There we go. It's in the chat, and I will show it here as well. So please write into info@soupllc.com to claim that book. Dr. Mondschein, have you been looking at any of these comments to see?
Yes, yes, I have, and had I gone first, I think I would have made the same choice. But I'm going to go with Thomas Yale. And I liked what he said. There is also a matter of the timing of the birth of John the Baptist's birth to determine Jesus with respect to certain biblical passages along with the census. It was around or near September, according to that. And I thought it was really good.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. That is one of the proofs that we used to use when we tried to show that Jesus was born in the fall and not around December 25th. Again, I am not saying that because I think it's critically important. Jesus gave us no instructions about how and when, or even if we should celebrate his birth, and therefore, to me, it kind of doesn't matter. He left it to us on that one to determine all the various ways in which we can honor Jesus. And that's one of the reasons why today, though I eschewed all observances of Christmas as pagan in the past, I no longer find the need to take that, frankly, somewhat divisive stance. I respect completely the reasons for why somebody would make that decision. Many of my friends still hold to some of those beliefs, and I respect them for their conviction around those topics. And I'm happy to share that today I feel differently. And largely it has to do with that sign of a true Christian, John 13, verse 35. So Thomas, also please write to info@soupllc.com to claim your copy of Life at 12 College Road. There we go. Need an admin here to help me type that in. Where is Dan Sanderson when you need him? What is Dan up to anyway? Hope to have him back here in a week or two. I should have mentioned early on that he, is otherwise occupied tonight. Well, Eric, what have we left unsaid? Sorry,
What have we left? I don't think we've said a lot.
What words of wisdom do you have to share for those who may be existing in relationships where these religious beliefs are posing a challenge, or topics of Christmas pose a challenge, or how do we approach this issue of the essential unity of religious principles when the trappings of our traditions may get in the way?
Well, my first would be do no harm. Literally, do no harm. And there is no harm in recognizing and celebrating another person's religious holidays. We're if you truly believe there's only one God, and these religions are out there, and you can see from the teachings what's real and what's not. And like with what you said, it's their deeds, not their words. But if these celebrations which bring people together and are joyous, why not celebrate with people? There's nothing wrong with wishing people Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Happy Ramadan. There's absolutely nothing that should keep us apart. Now, if you don't have any relationship with someone from another religion, then you don't have to feel you have to celebrate everything. But if you do, I think true respect is to go ahead and acknowledge it and then celebrate it. There's nothing wrong. I don't see anything wrong with that. And as a Baha'i, we're taught, enjoy it. Now, I was blessed. I got Hanukkah and I got Christmas. I mean, in one right into the other. It was a wonderful time growing up for me. Now, those were different times. The 50s and 60s are gone. But there was a lot to be said about them that was good. There's a lot that needed to be changed, and a lot of it has changed.
But you do share many of those things in your book. So those of you who did not win a copy, I'm going to throw the QR code out there for your book too, so that some of the viewers can, who unfortunately did not win a copy, can scan that in on their code and go order it. I want to just add to your comments there at the end, because I wholeheartedly concur. But again, I come from a particularly persnickety religious background. And if any of those folks are viewing, I'd like to share an example from the Bible that I recently, I actually didn't read this anywhere. So it's my own concoction. Take it with a grain of salt, buyer beware before you buy into this. But I found it fascinating to think about the fact that, the first children were Cain and Abel that are mentioned in the Garden of Eden. And Eve was told she would have sorrow in her childbirth. And sure enough, nothing, the pain of childbirth itself probably did not compare to the fact that, as the story goes, her firstborn son killed his younger brother. Cain killed Abel. A tragic start to the human family. Fast forward, and you have the story of the prodigal son. And it occurred to me that Jesus, in one sense, and I am an author, we're both authors, Eric, and we know about editing, and we know about rewriting stories. It's like the story of of Cain and Abel was rewritten. But in this presentation of that story of sibling rivalry, the good son becomes the villain of the story. In the story of Cain and Abel, the good son was Abel. His offering was more pleasing to God than Cain's was. It says God had favor towards Abel's offering, but he did not have favor towards Cain's offering. I won't get into why and how and all that, but Cain got jealous, and God warned Cain not about his offering. He didn't say, you better shape up and do a better offering for me. He didn't say that at all. He said, beware, sin lies at the door and it desires you, and you must rule over it. But Cain didn't, and he slew his brother. Well, fast forward, you've got the bad son taking his father's inheritance, leaving home and squandering it on wine, women, and song. And he ends up eating with the pigs, literally. He's like trying to grab the slops from a pigsty. And then he realizes that the servants in his father's household have it better than him. And he determines he would go back and beg his father to let him be a servant. And so the wayward son returns home, and the father, seeing him, rushes out to greet him before he even got close. And he puts on him a coat, and he kills the fatted calf, and he throws a party because this son that was lost to me has returned. And now we have the good son getting jealous. The good son is jealous and says, what am I, chopped liver? You never killed the fatted calf for me. I've been here faithfully serving you, and you haven't done squat for me, the son says. And the father looks at him in kindness and love and says, what are you talking about? You're always with me, and everything I have is yours. Why would I not celebrate the return of this lost son? This is the attitude that Jesus expressed, flipping entirely the story on its head, flipping the script, and showcasing that, what goes around comes around, and we're all that wayward son from time to time, and hopefully we're all that obedient son from time to time. And one more comment, when it comes to these religious traditions, Jesus clearly says, and it says, I think multiple places in the Bible, who are you to judge another man's servant? We are all servants of God. All of us are servants of God, and it's the devil's job, it says, to accuse the brethren. He is the accuser of the brethren, right? So that's just me moralizing at the end of this story. But to sort of defend why today, yes, I have no problem celebrating Christmas, even though at times in my life it would have been anathema to me, and I would have, never been caught in the same room with a Christmas tree and presents because of their supposed pagan origin. But today I feel differently about that, and I wholeheartedly concur with your sentiments around, just enjoy it.
Well, I look at it with do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if these celebrations mean something to my neighbor and they're happy about it, then why shouldn't I enjoy it with them? And I don't want to put them down. I don't want to hurt their feelings. So I'm going to enjoy it too.
Well, and if you really feel obligated, when they're sitting down watching Christmas Story and no mention of Jesus is made, you might say, hey, I love this heartwarming story, but let's spend a moment talking about what Christmas is supposed to signify. Who was Jesus and what did he teach, and why do we celebrate his birth, and why do we celebrate it with gift giving?
Well, you see, now you're getting into a whole nother subject. Is why are we taking God out of everything?
Right.
And that's really what the issue is there. But that's a whole nother night.
No, but thank you, because I want to announce to the viewership, guess what? We're going to dive deeply into that topic in 2024. When we come back after the holidays, we're going to go back to, some shows that we did a year or more ago. We're going to talk about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States of America, the idea of freedom of religion versus freedom from religion, and talk a little bit more about this subtitle, created in the image of God, the role of religion in society. What is our role as individuals? What should we be doing about the fact that religion has been pushed to the fringe and pushed out completely out of modern life? And how do we resist trend, and how do we respectfully and within the law exercise our freedom of religion, discuss topics of religious significance, discuss God, and so on. And so next week on the first show in the new year, we'll be having Cameron Cowan, who we've had as a guest on the show before. He's got his own podcast, the Cameron Journal. He has a religious background. Today, he's not religious, and might even to some degree, sort of be arguing the other side of the issue. But we'll be talking about freedom of or freedom from religion next week on the 2nd of January. What does the separation of church and state entail? What does the Constitution say? How has it been implemented? How should it be implemented on this vital topic? I might add, Dr. Mondschein, we would love to have you back in the new year, because share here at the close of the show what we haven't even disclosed at all. In what do you have a doctorate?
Law and education. So I have taught the Constitution and civil rights, and I've worked for the federal government in the Office for Civil Rights. And yeah.
And full disclosure, even though I have taken probably undue advantage of Dr. Mondschein and his expertise over the last few years to ask him question after question after question, anytime I open my mouth and talk about any of these subjects, forget that I ever talked to him, because as he will always share with me, you didn't quite listen to it. You didn't quite understand what I was trying to say with that one. And I'm very grateful to have those minor course corrections as I explore this topic and learn about it.
Well, it's been a heck of a ride. I love it.
And thank you again for showing up. And we're half an hour over time, but as always, it's quite a pleasure, and we'll definitely try to have you back in the new year.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
And to our audience, thank you for participating. Thank you for the chat messages. We couldn't get to sharing them all, but Thomas and Lord Kyle or Kai, please reach out by those email addresses. Claim your free books. We'll get those sent to you. And tune in next week, same place, same time. Until then, may God be with you.